The first thing you should know if you're planning on buying a GPU in May is that you might want to wait until the very end of May when we're expected. This is still just rumored, but it's very heavily rumored. It's probably happening. We're getting a 4060 Ti on May 24th. Again, rumored date. And we're also expecting in July to be getting the 4060 non-Ti and a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte version. Now, the overall performance on these is expected for the 4060 Ti at least to be around a 3070 Ti type performance, but at much better energy efficiency and with new features like AV1 encoding and DLSS 3 frame generation. And then also from AMD, we are expecting an RX 7600. The rumored release date on this one is May 25th, and we don't seem to know quite as much about what sort of performance to expect, although it is rumored to be an 8 gigabyte card. And I think price will be everything on this one. The rumored price right now, the latest rumor is 350 euros. And if you would take off the 20% VAT and convert to dollars, that seems to put it somewhere in the $300 to $330 range. So anyway, if you're buying in that price point, I do recommend just waiting until the end of the month. Now, if you're buying in about the $200 price point, which is about the lowest I think you should go when you're buying a new GPU, you should buy the RX 6600. It's better than the more expensive RTX 3050, and I think going anything below this point, there's just diminishing returns unless you buy used. Now, if you're considering buying used, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Jawa.gg. Now, they also do sell new parts as well, and this is a marketplace where you could sell your GPU or even your whole old system in order to help fund your upgrade. This is a fantastic way to do that, and they make it extremely easy to do so. You can just list your parts here, upload your high-quality picture. They have a database of parts that auto-populates the specs for you. They review the listing. They also review it for fair pricing. I love that they do this. Jawa, to my understanding, was started at least partially in response to the scalping market during the crypto boom, where they were actually trying to make sure people would price things fairly, which I absolutely love. Anyway, when your item sells, they'll email you a shipping label. You print and ship it within 3 business days. They make it super easy, and then you get paid within 2 days directly in the bank account. Seems awesome. That's how the selling works. You can also, like I said, look for both new and used parts. They even sell entirely completed gaming PCs, and the link will be in the video description. And again, huge thank you to Jawa for sponsoring, because they've also helped with the sponsorship fees. I've been able to increase my GPU stash to include a 6650 XT, which is $260 right now, along with a 6700. Which is $275 right now. Now, I haven't completed my testing on those to show you the footage, but they do perform a bit better than, although not like light years better than, the 6600 non-XT, which I can show you some footage of, and that's at about $250. And all 3 of these GPUs are a much better deal than the RTX 3050. Which is Nvidia's current low-end offering. It's coming in at $270. It gets beaten heavily by the 6600 XT, which, like I said, then there's the 6650 XT for $10 more, which is a few percent better. And then the 6700 non-XT is coming in at $275 with the advantage of 2 gigabytes more VRAM at 10 gigabytes rather than 8. And like I said, even faster than the 6600 XT and 6650 XT. Now, like I said, I haven't completed my testing on that. I can pull up a chart here real quick from Tom's Hardware when it came out if you want to get a rough idea of how it stacks up. So it does certainly outperform the other offerings. So my recommended GPU in the $250 to $280 price point is try to stretch it to right about that $280 and get yourself a 6700 non-XT. I think the extra 2 gigabytes of VRAM and a bit more performance is certainly worth it, and they're definitely beating the Nvidia offering of the RTX 3050. Now, if you're feeling like I'm doing nothing but recommending AMD GPUs, let me just stop for a second here and let's talk about AMD versus Nvidia versus Intel. So first thing I want to mention here is I've kind of brushed aside that there's an A750 from Intel at $230. And there's an A770, and this is getting up a little bit more expensive, and I'll talk about this price segment next. into the $330 to $350 range, if you're considering those. Certainly pay the little bit extra to get that 16 gigabyte offering. But I think that AMD offers the good deal, but with more mature software. I have had headaches using my Intel GPUs. It's gotten better, but it's still not perfect. So I think for advanced users who are aware that there is still teething issues on the software, you could consider the Intel offerings here. They are very competitive price to performance, but I'm not going to be giving them my recommendation in this video for a more general audience. I still think more mature drivers and better support for older games and things like that will cause less headaches for the less advanced users who don't know what they're getting themselves into with some of the quirky issues that are still going on with Intel. Now, how about AMD versus Nvidia? Nvidia certainly has the ray tracing advantage, but you know, at the lower price points, I don't think that's a big deal because generally you're tweaking graphic settings down, not up, in order to increase your performance. At least that's my general take. Also, if you get a higher baseline performance, like, you know what, let's look at two GPUs here, for example. The next price point up is the RTX 3060 from Nvidia. And that's coming in at about $340. Now, that's for the 12 gigabyte version. There is an 8 gigabyte version that's a bit cheaper right now. However, the 8 gigabyte version doesn't just have less VRAM, it also has a cut down memory bus. I don't have one to test myself, but it is significantly worse performance, especially in certain games, compared to the 12 gigabyte version. So I do think it would make sense to get the 12 gigabyte version. But anyway, the 12 gigabyte version is $340, and would it make sense to buy over the RX 6700 XT? So here's the thing. They cost the same. The 6700 XT just performs significantly faster. It's not even close unless you enable ray tracing. Now, if you enable ray tracing at a fairly low level, the 6700 XT is still faster because it came from a high enough point that even if it loses more performance relatively to its baseline, it stays ahead. If you enable super heavy ray tracing, then sure, Nvidia might win, but in a Pyrrhic victory where it's like they're not settings you're actually going to want to use anyway. What I do think is more compelling from Nvidia is DLSS upscaling. DLSS 2 is better than FSR 2, especially at lower resolutions and especially at more aggressive settings. However, that being said, I do think that a card like the 6700 XT has a high enough performance lead over the 3060 that the 3060 would need to use upscaling when the 6700 XT just wouldn't. So in other words, if their performance was close, I would certainly, or the price was close, like I do think Nvidia should command a higher price point for its software advantages with DLSS 2 and for its ray tracing advantage, but only to a, you know, there's a limit to that, right, when you're talking gaming performance. So if AMD is offering enough of a performance advantage at the same price point, especially at performance tiers where ray tracing is not going to be all that usable anyway, I really think it makes sense to go with the AMD offering, like the 6700 XT, which is getting my $340 recommendation here. Now, if you're talking about a productivity workload, then you would want to seriously consider your workload and whether or not the apps are programmed for good AMD support. A lot of apps are, but some aren't. They target the market leader, a lot of CUDA core acceleration, things like that. So you need to look at your own workflow, and so there's definitely professional use cases where you kind of just are locked into the NVIDIA option. Anyway, let's take a look at some other price points here. So after the 3060, comes the 3060 Ti, which is $400, and I've got to say, with the new GPUs coming out, I expect some pressure at this point. The 3060 Ti performs similarly to the 6700 XT, but it has 8 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12. We have seen that start to cause some issues lately. It's not the end of the world, but it also costs a lot more money than the 6700 XT. And like I said, it's probably going to get supplanted here soon with the 4060 Ti, which hopefully is priced competitively, although we do still have to wait and see. So with that in mind, I don't think I can recommend the 3060 Ti, and even if you were considering it, the 6750 XT comes in from AMD at $380 and is just plain old faster. Although whether that's worth the jump from the 6700 non-XT, I'm not so sure it is if you can get the 6700 non-XT for 340, but you could consider the jump. Now, past that point, Nvidia has the 3070 still available, as well as the 3070 Ti, but you should not consider either of them. The 3070 Ti is too close in cost to the 4070 to make any sense, and the 3070 is too close in cost to the RX 6800. The RX 6800 costs $485 and has double the VRAM and better performance. But honestly, I wouldn't even buy the 6800 because the 6800 XT version is $506 right now. So in other words, I think if you're going to get something that's meaningfully better than the 6700 XT in the current market, I think you're jumping to the 6800 XT at $506. It is a meaningful jump, and it is actually matching the 4070 in rasterized performance and has more VRAM and comes in $100 less. Now, that being said, let's talk about the 4070. So the 4070 has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, which I think at 1440p is still fine right now in the games we have. Some of them are pushing right up at that 12 gigabyte line, which then raises some concerns about what will be the longevity of playing at ultra settings, 2 or 3 years from now. And that's a question that nobody has an answer to. But what we do know is that having more VRAM has always helped the longevity of GPUs in the past, and there's no reason to expect that to change. So the 6800 XT offering you similar performance for less money, although I am seeing $590 on the 4070. Looks like it's dipped a little below its MSRP, but still almost a $100 gap for similar performance and more VRAM on the 6800 XT. Makes that pretty compelling. Also, if you are spending $600, there is the 6950 XT, which still has the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, like the 6800 XT, more than the 4070, but comes in at higher overall performance. Again, though, once you kick on ray tracing, which the 4070 is strong enough to use in a lot of cases at 1440p, once you use upscaling, DLSS 2 does look better, and the 4070 does have frame generation, which is very usable in a lot of single-player games. If you get a baseline frame rate around 60 or more, then you can increase that significantly in motion smoothness. There's a bit of a latency penalty there. There can be some image quality artifacting, but I've found that in most single-player games, it's very usable. I don't mind or even notice the latency, and I do like the extra motion smoothness on a high refresh rate monitor. And also the 4070 comes in at a much lower power consumption and a smaller form factor. So what that means is I actually think there's an interesting argument between all three GPUs in the $500 to $600 price point. The 6800 XT offers you actually similar performance to the 6950 XT for $100 less, and they both have the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and there's no real feature differences. So between those two, you might be tempted to save the $100 and just go with the 6800 XT. And then once you throw the 4070 into the mix, especially versus the 6950 XT, honestly, just look at how big is your case and how good is your power supply, because there's a lot of cases and power supplies that won't support a 6950 XT, but they will support a 4070. And you'll probably notice it on your energy bill as well if you're in one of the countries that have significantly high energy consumption right now. So this is a very tricky matchup, and I don't think there's a wrong choice here as long as you make the right choice for your preferences and use case. Again, Nvidia, you've got with the 4070. Man, if the 4070 had just come in at $500 though, I could just easily recommend it over both the 6800 XT and the 6950 XT, with the one caveat being, 12 gigabytes of VRAM versus 16. But the fact that it's at $600 makes this a much closer comparison than I'd like it to be, which is frustrating. You wish that the new generation would come in and just mop the floor with the previous generation, and we just didn't see that here, which is a concern. But while I will give the 6800 XT my $500 recommendation, because there's really no reasonable competitor against it at that price point, at the $600 price point, I'm going to give a split recommendation between the 6950 XT and the 4070, because the 4070 has significant feature advantages, energy efficiency advantages. It might fit in your case better. You might not need to upgrade your power supply, lower your power bill, frame generation, all of that. The 6950 XT is just faster at rasterized performance for the same price, though, with more VRAM, and so there is certainly a compelling argument to buy that instead as well. So I'm giving you a split recommendation there, and you could watch my dedicated head-to-head video of those two GPUs for more thoughts, but I will say at the end, I still kind of gave a split recommendation and let people argue it out in the comment section. I will say the comment section was mostly full of people saying you'd be stupid not to buy the 6950 XT. But like I said, I think there's valid reasons to buy the 4070. I just wish it cost $100 less. Anyway, let's move up to the next price point. Unfortunately, we're jumping up $200 to the next price point. The 4070 Ti is $800. And the 7900 XT had an MSRP of $900 but has dropped down to $780 on the actual market, making it a little bit cheaper than the 4070 Ti. Here, there's a big VRAM difference again with 20 gigabytes versus 12 gigabytes. And I've got to say, spending $800 for 12 gigabytes of VRAM on the 4070 Ti feels bad. That being, and if you're considering these as 4K GPUs, I think the 20 gigabytes of VRAM on the 7900 XT probably means it's the better choice. And FSR2 quality at 4K is very good. DLSS can be used more aggressively though, and then frame generation is certainly nice to have, and the 4070 Ti is more energy efficient. The 7900 XT though is just faster when you're not ray tracing. However, when you're using heavy ray tracing, the 4070 Ti is faster. So there's arguments to be made here once again. Although, like I said, 12 gigabytes feels bad for $800, really bad. However, if you're buying these for 1440p, I think the 12 gigabytes is less concerning right now. Like I said, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, it might be more concerning, and you might wish you had the 20 gigabytes. But I've got to say, if I'm recommending based on things right now, I'm going to give a split recommendation again. I think for the extra VRAM at 4K or with thinking more in terms of longevity, you're going to hang onto your GPU a long time. It's been pretty consistently true that having more VRAM helps your GPU be useful longer. 20 gigabytes is a lot more than 12, and you have a higher baseline performance level. So that makes a lot of sense, but the 4070 Ti has usable ray tracing performance where that might sway you, frame generation, upscaling, and 12 gigabytes at 1440p is enough right now. So split recommendation here. You can go ahead and choose the one that makes the most sense to you. Now, if you add on another X to the 7900 XT, you get the 7900 XTX, and that extra X will cost you another $200. So we're going up to $970. It's down a bit from its MSRP of $1,000, and it stands alone at this price point. Nvidia does not have a $1,000 GPU on the market right now. So that means the 7900 XTX by default gets my $1,000 price point recommendation. It has 24 gigabytes of VRAM, which is awesome. It performs very well at 1440p and 4K. It's a very good GPU. That being said, if you do have a little more money in your budget, the RTX 4080 has dropped $80 from its MSRP down to $1,120. And that is still a lot more money than the 7900 XTX. Also, the 4080 has 16 gigabytes versus the 24 on the 7900 XTX, and the XTX is slightly faster when you're not using ray tracing, although that's certainly not enough faster to be that big of a difference. Meaning, and then when you enable ray tracing, the 4080 is significantly faster, and especially if you're playing at 1440p, but even at 4K using DLSS, The 4080 does have the horsepower for ray tracing to be a very real selling point, something that you will probably consider using. And so same thing with frame generation in single player titles with ray tracing, kick on DLSS quality and frame generation with some ray tracing, and it's really offering you an experience the 7900 XTX just doesn't. So in other words, if they cost the same, I would rather have the 4080 despite its less VRAM. And I don't think the rasterized performance is different enough for it to make that big of a selling point for the XTX. The bigger selling point for the XTX is just that it costs less. So I'm going to give the 4080 my $1,120 GPU recommendation, and I do think I'd rather have it than the 7900 XTX. The 7900 XTX costs less. So if that's the $970 price point is your ceiling, get yourself the 7900 XTX, and it's a great GPU. If your price point doesn't have a ceiling, you might as well go up to the 4090. It is significantly faster than the 7900 XTX and the 4080. You will especially appreciate the difference if you're playing at 4K. I game at 4K, and I do use the 4090. I also have a 4080. I can tell which one I'm using. The 4090, it has the 24 gigabytes of VRAM, but again, 16 gigabytes hasn't really been a problem for me at 4K. But the 24 gigabytes is certainly nice to have. The horsepower is great. Frame generation at 4K is awesome to have. DLSS quality of frame generation on a 4090. It really is an amazing GPU. It just costs $1,600, and I realize that is just far outside of what most people would be willing to consider for a GPU. But if you're going for ultra high-end 4K gaming or even ultra-wide 1440p, it can make a lot of sense as well. Anyway, so yeah, the best overall GPU, if money is not a factor, there's your 4090. Again, in conclusion though, definitely remember that the 7600 from AMD and the 4060 Ti are heavily rumored to be coming out at the end of this month, and I think it would make a lot of sense to figure out what they're going to be priced at before pulling the trigger on anything in the $400-ish range, because I have a feeling, again, it could even be 300 and something on the 7600. Now, I'm not sure the 7600 is actually going to be better than a 7700 XT. If you just look at the specs on it, it's 8 gigabytes versus 12. And if it's priced similar to the 6700 XT, which is a 12 gigabyte card, I know it's the older technology, but it does have more compute units. I'm going to be really interested if this can actually compete with AMD's previous generation, actually. So stay tuned to the channel. I will absolutely be covering these as all the rumors as well as official information does become available. And I do want to do one of these GPU buying guides every single month. And a huge thank you to all of my subscribers, channel members, as well as today's sponsor, Jawa. Remember, you can buy and sell on Jawa, and I really think you should click that link in the video description and take a look at what they have to offer, as well as sell your hardware to upgrade, help fund your upgrade for your new GPU. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.